You see a motion that looks like backspin, but the ball comes out with topspin. Players with strong fingers and wrists can disguise the spin at the last second. So, what should you do then? Alright, today we're covering the service return. Receiving serves is tough. But do you know why it's so difficult? First, you have to read the spin, and then you have to deal with the placement. Then there's the pace. A fast serve and a slow serve require completely different timing. On top of that, you have to account for the height of the bounce. Especially against a new opponent, if you can return their serve, you can compete. If you can't, you'll get crushed. Let's first break down how to handle the rhythm of the serve. There are basically 3 types of tempo. The first type is an extremely fast serve. The second is a normal paced serve, which is the easiest for us to attack. The third is a very slow serve. It's hard to generate your own power against these, and I struggle with them too. So how do we handle these 3 tempos? You must learn to time your backswing with the ball. For a fast serve, your backswing must be quick. For a medium-paced serve, use a normal backswing. For a slow serve, you must slow your backswing down to match. Once you master this timing, you'll be a much better player. If you match the rhythm, you won't be late or get jammed by the ball. See? A fast serve isn't so intimidating when you're prepared for it. I believe the biggest weakness for most players isn't the spin. You can always push or block to get it back. The real problem is misjudging the tempo and placement. Your swing frequency must match the server's motion. If I serve fast, your preparation must be fast. If I serve at a medium pace, your backswing should match that pace. And if I serve even slower, your backswing must also be slow and deliberate. Your return tempo needs to be synchronized with the ball's speed off the server's racket. That's how you find the right contact point. Otherwise, you'll either get jammed or rush your shot. You were jammed on that one. Make your backswing quicker. Once you master this rhythm, you can cut your unforced errors by 20 to 30%. After that, focus on placement. The spin becomes much easier to handle. If it's backspin, I'll push. If it's topspin, I'll block. The key is to lock into the rhythm of the serve. This applies to your backswing timing. Start your backswing on the first bounce, and make contact on the second bounce. Someone mentioned that in a real match, opponents won't always serve to your backhand. That's true. But first, you have to master the rhythm on a fixed placement before you can even think about covering different placements. If you can't even return a serve to a predictable spot, how can you expect to cover the whole table? I can't teach you placement first. If you can't get the timing right, judging placement is pointless. So, your first challenge is mastering the tempo, not the placement. When the serve is to a fixed spot, why do you still miss? It's the rhythm. Only after solving this can we move on to placement. Okay, point 2, reading full table placement is another area where amateur players concede many points. In amateur matches, serves are often illegally hidden, and it can be hard to call it. My advice is this: if you can read the motion, do it. If you can't, abandon it quickly. Don't waste too much time trying to analyze a deceptive motion. To judge placement, the most important thing is to watch the trajectory of their arm swing. If the player's motion is very horizontal, the serve is likely going cross-court or down the line. If their motion is more forward and back, the serve will most likely land towards the middle of the table. To serve wide to the line, they have to use more body rotation. So, after observing a few serves, you can start to recognize their habits and patterns based on their swing path. Next, watch the forearm. I don't think watching the racket is reliable because of all the deceptive wrist action. But the forearm is a much more reliable indicator. Watch me serve 2 balls, one cross-court, diagonal, one down the line, straight. You'll notice the finishing position of my forearm is different. For a cross-court serve, the forearm finishes like this. For a down-the-line serve, the forearm has to push forward more. Even if my racket face is aimed one way, I can't serve wide without this follow-through. I can only serve down the line if my forearm extends in that direction. So, the more their forearm points towards the line, the higher the probability the serve is going to your forehand. If their forearm finishes further from their body and pointing diagonally forward, the serve will likely be to your backhand or the middle. If their forearm finishes closer to their body and pointing straight ahead, there's an 80% chance the serve is going wide to your forehand. So, don't just watch the racket. Pros can read the racket face, but for amateurs, I recommend watching the forearm. It's a larger, easier target to see. Even if the server hides the contact point with their body, they can't hide their entire forearm. Of course, if you're advanced enough to read the racket, that's even better. This isn't an absolute rule. Third, if you can't read the motion at all, watch the first bounce on their side of the table. Notice the difference when I serve cross-court versus down the line. That was cross-court. Now, down the line. This applies to hook serves as well. The first bounce for cross-court and down the line serves is different. You'll find that the first bounce of a cross-court serve is further from the server's body, while the first bounce of a down the line serve is closer. This is because if the first bounce is too far out, it's physically difficult to generate a strong serve down the line. I need the ball to be closer to my body to serve effectively down the line. Therefore, the closer the first bounce is to the sideline, the more likely the serve is going to your forehand. Another tip is to watch the ball as it crosses the net. If it's not already heading on a sharp angle, you need to start preparing for a down-the-line ball. In table tennis, you can never hesitate for too long. You can't wait until the ball bounces on your side to react, which is a common mistake. You must learn to anticipate. Some might say watching the forearm is bad advice. But if the racket is hidden, what else are you going to watch? Watching the forearm is an extremely effective method. We usually teach players to watch the racket head, the racket face, and the point of contact, but many players find this too difficult. So, we need to find an alternative strategy, a workaround. You can use the forearm to read spin, not just placement. When the forearm finishes below the elbow, it's backspin. When the forearm finishes above the elbow, it's topspin. When the motion is flat and forward, it's a no-spin or semi-spin ball, which could be slightly topspin or backspin. For example, if I want to serve sidespin backspin, the direction of my arm motion is non-negotiable. To create backspin, there must be a downward component to the swing. The server can make the motion very fast, but the downward path must still be there. The downward motion of the forearm is a much larger and clearer visual cue than the tiny movement of the racket head. It's like trying to spot a mosquito versus a bat. The larger object is much easier to track. It's the same principle. This method can significantly reduce the difficulty for amateur players. It's much better than having no read at all. It really works. Now, let's talk more about spin. For this demonstration, I'm not going to watch her serving motion. I'll only react after I hear the first bounce. My point is this: when I can't read the spin, my default action is to use more friction and loop the ball. For short balls, I'll use a side spin push. We're talking about situations where the serve is very deceptive with fake motions. If the motion is obvious and you still can't read it, then the problem is your own observation skills. My rule for all short serves is to use a side spin push. I don't give myself two options. If you hesitate between attacking and pushing, you'll make more mistakes. I commit to one answer. To be honest, maybe my level isn't high enough, but I can only confidently read about 60 to 70% of serves. For the rest, my strategy is, use a side spin push for short balls, and brush loop the long ones. I never take a full swing. I'll go for a backhand rip, but I'll drop my racket low and focus on generating maximum friction. I don't use a lot of power because I'm afraid of hitting it long. My only goal is to lift the ball over the net with heavy topspin. I always aim for the middle, because on unreadable serves, the side spin is usually heavy. Aiming for the middle neutralizes the side spin. That's my method. Feel free to use it if you find it helpful. No matter what serve you give me, I'll use the same technique, a compact brush loop towards the middle. Stay close to the ball and don't try to force the power. Even on a fast serve, I use the same controlled return. This applies to my forehand as well. If the serve is long, I use this controlled loop. If it's short, I push it to the middle. I do this simply to avoid misreading the spin. Now, if a serve has a very obvious motion and you still can't tell if it's topspin or backspin, then you need to practice your observation skills. But you cannot hesitate between two choices. Indecision leads to a rushed shot, and you have a 50% chance of guessing wrong and making an error. Here's another scenario. You see a motion that looks like backspin, but the ball comes out with topspin. Players with strong fingers and wrists can disguise the spin at the last second. In this situation, you must memorize their specific motion. For example, let's say whenever he does this motion, it's heavy backspin, and you loop it into the net. If you try again and hit the net again, then the next time you see that exact same motion, switch to a push. That's right. Don't be stubborn and fight it. When you see that specific motion and spin again, and your attack keeps failing, switch your strategy to a slow push or a pressing block. For a very heavy spin serve, use a slow push, but pay attention to your placement. If you push to the middle, you'll get attacked. Push it wide to their backhand, where it's difficult for anyone to generate a high-quality attack. Use a pressing block against the topspin. With this approach, you can neutralize any spin. Even if you practice service returns for 10 years, you can still misread the serve of a new opponent, even if they are a weaker player. Everyone's serve is unique. So, if you keep looping into the net, switch to a slow push. If you keep hitting it long, switch to a pressing block. A pressing block is a defensive shot. Don't overextend your arm forward. Use a defensive mindset to handle their topspin. And use a mindset like you're returning a chop to handle their heavy backspin. Problem solved. This is all based on over a decade of playing, making mistakes, and getting beaten. No one reads every serve perfectly. Everyone makes return errors. The key is, when you do misread a serve, how quickly can you adjust and find a solution to the problem the server has presented? You just have to figure it out. Sometimes, just returning one extra serve per game is all it takes to win.